Hello again. Welcome back. So in this video, my main goal is going to be to show my process for prepping a photograph for laser engraving from start to finish. Um, I do still own a few diode lasers, and my preparation for them is slightly different. Not much, but it is slightly different. But I'm going to prep this image as though I'm getting it ready for use on my CO2 laser. Um, the very first thing I do after I load an image up is I upscale it if need be, and every once in a while, depending on where I got the picture from, sometimes you may need to downscale it a little bit. But so to change the size of an image, you'll come up here to the top, you'll click Image, then you'll come right down here to Image Size. And I took this picture is a photograph that I took myself with my DSLR, so it's already a pretty high resolution. But the sweet spot that I have found for my machine is 330 DPI. Whoops. And that could be different. Everyone may have, your machine may have a different sweet spot. But for me, it's right around 330 DPI. Uh, and you can change the size here accordingly if you need to, and sometimes it is beneficial if this picture is going to be for a specific material, and you already have that material to size. It can certainly be beneficial to go ahead and try to get it as close to your material size here as you can, and then you could come back and use the crop tool up here later to narrow it down a little more if you need it, if need be. But when I'm just prepping, unless this is going on a very specific material, I don't change the size, and like I said, unless I need to. So I'll go ahead and hit OK on that. Okay, and then the second thing I do, and here once again, if you watch the keyboard shortcut video, I'm using the Alt key and my mouse wheel to zoom in and out. Um, so, and a lot of people, when they prep their images, they will, after they change the size or before, they'll come up here and they'll immediately change the mode to grayscale, which you can do, and that discards all color data from the image. Then you can come up here and begin to use brightness and contrast adjustments and things like that. But what I've found, and I'm just going to hit my Control-Alt-Z and undo that grayscale change. If the image is already black and white when you start to prep it, by all means go ahead and convert it to grayscale and work from there. But if an image is color, in my opinion, you have much more control over the image and the lights and the darks if you use a black and white adjustment rather than turning it to grayscale. And I'll show you why here in just a second. But I wanted to sidebar and talk about tools versus adjustments real quick. So this black and white, this is an adjustment. This is you can make adjustments here and it will directly affect the layers that are beneath it. And you can use this little button right here. What this will do, and you'll see how you'll see how this slides over. That makes it to where it only affects the layer that's directly under it. With this box unselected, this adjustment will affect all layers below it. Everything you see over here on this bar are tools. So this would be your paintbrush tool. This is the clone stamp tool. This is the I can't remember the name of the tool, but it's the fix it tool. You've got your move tool, your pen tool. Everything you see over here are adjustments. So you have your brightness and contrast adjustment, your levels adjustment, and so on and so forth. Just wanted to do a little sidebar, and because you'll hear me say that this such and such tool or such and such adjustment, that way there was kind of a clear division there in your head. But as I mentioned, I like to use the black and white tool because it gives you much more control over the lights and the darks of the image rather than just straight converting it to grayscale and you're at the mercy of the image itself. So I'm going to come over here and I'm going to start, and basically what I'll do is I'll just start moving the slider back and forth and see what I see. Okay, I see what we got going here. So I can use the red slider, and it would be nice. I think I'm going to drop this down a little bit to kind of tame down the lens flare from the sun there. I feel like it just looks a little better. There we go. Let's move the yellows and see. Yeah, there was lots of yellowing going on in the foliage in this picture, so the yellow slider is going to give us a lot of adjustment. So I think I'm going to use the yellow. I'm going to bring this up a little bit to kind of just bring up the highlights in some of the grasses that we have going on here. Let's see what we got from our blue. So the cyan slider is going to affect the sky up there. And I think I'm gonna, so that was about baseline. I think I'm gonna lighten it up a little bit. I don't want to lighten it up too much because I don't want to lose some of the darkness in the sky up here, and I also don't want to lose the shadow along the side of the silo there. So let's go ahead and move the actual blue slider. Same thing. So we're getting the sky, a little bit of the silo, and then some change on the fence posts down there too, which is good because I was going to clean those up manually anyway. So I'm going to bring that up to about right there. I think that looks good. And I don't have set numbers that I use for a lot of these things. I just look and see what they're adjusting and move it to somewhere that I find that pleases me. So let's go ahead and try the magenta. I don't think the magenta is going to affect much because I didn't see too many purple tones in this picture. Yeah, the magenta slider is not really affecting anything, so we'll leave that as it is. And I'm going to call this good. I like this on our black and white adjustment. I think that gives us a good baseline to start with. And this is completely not required, but for me, since we're not going to need to mess with this black and white adjustment layer anymore, I'm going to select it, and then I'm going to hold down the control key, and then I'm also going to select the background layer. Then I'm going to right click on them and merge them. That way that black and white, that it's just became a permanent change to the image, and we don't have to worry about it getting accidentally tweaked or changed later. That's just how the image is now. So from there, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to move on to the brightness and contrast adjustment right here. And the brightness is pretty good on this image as is. It's one of the things I love about this picture. I felt like I nailed the exposure real well when I took it. Maybe I'll bring it up just a little bit. And then let's go ahead and bring the contrast up a little. And some people when they prep their images, don't want to say a lot of people, but I've seen people just automatically up. They automatically bring the contrast up. And like I said, I look at it because in some images, especially if it's not already a detail heavy image, you can gain some detail back by actually bringing the contrast down. And then later using which we'll get to next, using the levels adjustment to kind of bring a little bit of the contrast back in. So for this one though, I think I do like it bringing the contrast up a little bit, but I'm not going to get crazy with it. I think I'm going to bring it up about 10 or 15. Yeah, let's bring that down to 15, and we'll call that good. And then I'm going to go ahead and come up here, and we're going to select the levels adjustment. Now, I love the levels adjustment because what it does is it gives you control over the dark tones, the mid tones, and the highlights of an image. And in my experience for laser engraving, the most important one to pay attention to is the midtones, because the midtones can make or break an image. If the midtones are too high, as you'll notice up here in these clouds area, we can see this with our eye, but there's a high chance that this differentiation in gray to white here would not come out very well with the laser. So the midtones are very important. And the more of these midtones, if you push them up, a lot of these details in the grasses down here are going to start getting blown out too. Like we can still see them with our eye, but they wouldn't burn very well, and it's a balancing act of what your machine is capable of and your testing that will greatly affect your image preparation. So like for me, if I brought this up here, I know there's a good chance that a lot of this differentiation in grays and whites is not going to come out very well in my engraving. So I'll bring that back down. We'll call that good right there. Then we'll go ahead and bring the blacks up just a touch. You don't really need to bring them up too much, actually. I'm going to click down here and use my mouse wheel because I only want that at like a 3 or 4. Then we'll come over here to the highlights, and we're not going to need to adjust the highlights too much either, because once we do, it's going to really start blowing out the sky. Yeah, it blow out that sky very quickly. So I'm probably, once again, I'm going to use my mouse wheel and just bring this down a few ticks. And the more you do this, the more you'll get a feel for it. Like I said, in balance with what your machine is capable of based on your own testing. Okay, now that we have our brightness and contrast and our levels set, and these, I'll real quick, I'll mention these are, as far as adjustments, and the black and white adjustment that I already mentioned. Those are the three main adjustments that I use in image prep. And now on getting an honorable mention is the invert adjustment right here. Because let's say you were going to engrave this image onto a slate. After everything is said and done, and you have all of your tweaks and all of your adjustments made to the image to your liking, then you could come back and you want to invert it if you're going to engrave it on a slate or a painted canvas or something of that nature. Oh, look at what I did. Clicking the invert tool multiple times does not turn it off and on. It just adds more instances of the invert adjustment. Oh me, oh my, did I delete my levels? I did delete my levels. And as you can tell, I'm narrating this live as I work. I'm not doing the work and then coming back later to put my voice over it. Okay, now that we have our brightness and contrast and our levels set, the kind of the finishing touch, and I feel is one of the most important ones, and it's what helps me get some of the best results in my engravings, will be two tools that we have over here, and they exist on the same spot here. So if you push and click on this and hold, I'm sorry, that's the zoom tool. What we want here, if you click on this and push and hold with your mouse button, you'll get a little flyout. The two tools that I'm referring to here are the dodge tool and the burn tool. And what they do is the dodge tool will allow you to paint over certain areas with your cursor here and lighten those areas. And you can change between lightening shadows, lightening midtones, and lightening highlights. And then if you push and hold on this, and we select the burn tool does just the opposite. It allows you to paint over areas with your cursor and darken them. Same thing, you can switch between the shadows, darkening the midtones, or darkening the highlights. So I'll go ahead and click midtones here, and we're on the burn tool, which is going to darken areas. So I'll just make my cursor a little bigger there using the alt right click trick. And and real quick, you can also use this here will adjust the strength that it changes when you go over it with your stroke. So I'm going to bring this up quite a bit just so you can see. There you go. It's darkening the midtones as I paint over it. That's not painting colors, it's just darkening the pixels that already exist there. So I'm going to go ahead and undo those changes. I brought this slider up just so you could see the change. Typically, I operate with this slider because you don't want to make large adjustments at a time. I mean, maybe you run into a situation where you do, but typically you don't want to make large adjustments at a time. I don't typically operate with this any higher than 15%. And I go down as low as 5% sometimes if I'm just trying to just make slight adjustments. But for our purposes here, I'm going to leave it at 10. So now I'm going to come around to the image and I'm going to look for parts that I feel like need to be adjusted to present better in the engraving. And the first thing that really jumps out to me is where these clouds meet what is actually blue sky, but where these clouds meet the sky right here, I feel like that's not going to come out very well in engraving. And since these clouds are not black, they're gray, we're going to leave this on midtones. So now I'm just going to take my cursor and I'm going to kind of come along this area that I'm holding while I'm sort of coloring over these. And my goal is to just sort of darken these areas that are on the white where it meets the white. That way they stand out a little bit more, getting them to show up in the engraving a little better. Just get over those. Yeah. So now if I zoom back out, see how that has much more contrast to it. But also what we did is we kind of created a noticeable line here. So what you can do is just make a few light strokes out this way. And everything will just kind of blend together. Okay, now with my burn tool still on, I'm looking for any other areas that might need to have their midtones lightened up or darkened, excuse me. I don't see anywhere else where the midtones really need darkened too terribly much, but I do see some areas that could probably be lightened up. Oh, let me see. So what I'm going to do, I just saw something. I'm looking at these these metal rings and this bracework here on this silo. I think they could do to be lightened up, and since those are all really dark already, I'm going to select shadows. I'm going to bring this up to 15. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in. I'm going to make my cursor smaller, and I'm just going to swipe over these. Make it a little bit smaller even yet. And this can be very tedious work, but to me, I feel like it's worth it in the end because doing this tedious work will bear itself out very well in the engraving. And I also mentioned I'm doing this very fast with my mouse. Where typically I would still do it fast, but I would do it with my digital drawing monitor, which makes it go much faster. But since not everyone has a digital drawing monitor, I figured I would do it with my mouse for the purposes of the video, just like everyone else. All right, and I'm not going to go through every single one for the purpose of the video, but you've kind of seen what I'm doing here. And you could come through and continue to darken these up to your content. And the more you zoom in and the more you bring your cursor down to the same size as the line, the better looking the results will be. But what I'm going to do now, I'm going to switch over to the dodge tool. I'm going to make sure this is on midtones. And then I'm going to come through on this silo and I'm just going to lighten it up a little bit to kind of help that braced work stand out even better. I think I'm going to lighten up the midtones on this ladder way right here. And then I'm going to switch back to the burn tool and make sure this is on shadows, and then just come back over this ladder way again to kind of darken up these little rungs here. Good. I think that looks okay. Okay. Now, I think while I'm on my burn tool, I'm going to select midtones. And I'm going to darken these little guys back here just a little bit. Like I said, I just look and see what my eyeballs see, and I know what will probably burn well and what probably won't, just based on my own experience and my own testing with my machine. So I think I'm going to do a similar quick treatment on all of this grass that I did on the silo. While on my burn tool, I'm going to switch to shadows. And I'm going to make my cursor real big so I'm getting everything as much as I can at once. And all of the black areas and the really dark areas through this grass are going to get darkened up as I come over here with my cursor. Now I'm going to switch back over to the dodge tool. I'm going to go select highlights up here, make my cursor real big again. And now when I come through here, all of the little light areas, the little heads on the stalks of grass are going to get lightened up as I come through here with my cursor. I think I might do a quick pass on the midtones here as well, just to get a little bit more contrast between those dark areas and the heads of the stalks of grass. Okay, looking pretty good, I think. I think as a The final thing I'm going to do before I call it good is give these fence posts some love, and I'm going to give them a very similar treatment. While I'm on my shadows here, I'm going to come through and I'm just going to darken some of the shadowed area, the dark areas on these fence posts. I'm going to switch to the dodge tool, midtones. We're just going to lighten up the mids on these fence posts to really help them stand out. Okay. Let's see here. Fantastic. I think we could do another pass on this one down here on our shadows. Darken that stuff up a little. There we go. Okay, and to my eyes, this image seems like it would work relatively well. There is some more work I would do on it, but I'm not going to drag the video out for all of the little minutia that I do. But you've kind of I have kind of given you an idea of the things I hit and the methods that I use. So I realized I was watching the last video right after I finished recording it, and I realized I forgot one of the most crucial steps for laser engraving: dithering. So I figured I would jump back in real quick and show just this image is still right where I left it off. And if we were going to dither this image with Photoshop, then the next step would be easy. And once we go to change image modes, it'll make us do it anyway. But if you wanted to do it yourself beforehand, that way you don't give Photoshop the satisfaction, you could just select all of your layers and then go ahead and merge them. Then we're going to come up here and we're going to click Image, Mode. We're going to change it to Indexed Color. And then we're going to hit this drop down right here, and we're going to switch this to Local Selective. And 3 is the least amount of colors that it will give you. I honestly wish it would give us 2, but 3 is the least amount it will give us, which is fine. And for my CO2 laser, I typically leave the diffusion amount at 90%. And if I'm dithering is for one of my diode lasers, I go ahead and drop this down to either 70 or 75%. And just the diode handles it a little better when the pixels are the dots are a little more diffused. But I'm just gonna and here, while we still have this up, if you hold down Control, it'll give you a zoom. You can go ahead and zoom in, and you'll see how we're dithered. And if you've ever dithered images with Imager before, this will look familiar to you. But don't freak out when you click OK. Your image is going to go silly. But once again, if you use your Alt key and zoom in on it, you can see that's just what it does. If you've ever dithered images with using Imager, they do the same thing. But that's pretty much it for dithering images. You're switching the image mode to index mode, making sure you have the right amount selected here. Let me go ahead and hit Control Alt Z, excuse me, and undo that. And then once again, we're going to go to Image, Mode, Indexed Color. We're going to hit this drop down, change it to Local Selective. Make sure your colors are on 3. And we're going to hit the diffusion around 90%. That's it. And you just hit OK. Boom. Your image is dithered. The next step for me would be to save this image. And let's go ahead and talk about that real quick, actually. So for me, we're going to go File, Save As. I save all of my images as PNGs. And the main reason I choose that is because if I were to go ahead and click Save on here, it gives you the choice. PNGs are one of the few raster images that have the ability to be saved without compression. And you would all, for me, I always choose none, because that means that Photoshop will not compress the image. Compressing the image makes the file size smaller, but it can, if even only slightly, degrade the quality of the picture. So I always choose none, and if your pictures save faster that way. And past this, the next thing I would do is whatever material I intend to burn this image on, hopefully, if I have an extra piece of that material, whether it be wood or slate or tile, I would run a test. For slate, I will always run a test on a 4x4 coaster size slate. And then that way I can see if there's any areas that I need to come back and give any love in Photoshop, maybe some more time with the dodge and burn tools in certain areas. But yeah, and like with slate, once I have ran that test engraving, I can take a sander to it and sand it down and then use it again. Personally, I own a planer, and if you're going to work with lots of solid wood, I would recommend looking at investing in one at some point, because it's the same thing. I have different types of hardwood that I use for test pieces. I run engravings on them, and then they get fed to the planer, and I can use them again. So, but thanks for sticking around and listen to me ramble. And I hope that you have gleaned something useful from this video. And I'll have more to come. I'm gonna do one on removing backgrounds and taking simple clip art style things and getting the white out of them, and etc. So look forward to those. And once again, thanks for listening.